Welcome to VideoCopilot.net by Andrew Kramer. Welcome.
Shout out, Sonny Garcia actually sent me that, and he did a great job on it. I said, you know what? I'm putting that at the beginning of my next tutorial. Here we are, man of my word, always, unless I can weasel out of it somehow. In any case, we are going to be creating some jumpy text effects inside of After Effects. So here's sort of the idea. Okay, so might be a little hard to see, screen capture and all, but you can see it just kind of jumps in here and comes into place. And the main focus of this is just the text as it kind of regroups. So what we're going to do is create a new composition. All looks good. We'll make it 5 seconds. Okay, text tool, we're going to write Video Copilot. Yeah, pretty good, huh? Actually, I wanted to get into voiceovers, but my voice didn't change till I was like 20, and by then it was just too late. And so here we are. But that's all right. Text is looking pretty good. I'm going to make sure this is in the center. I'm going to turn this into a 3D layer, and I'm going to bring up the position options. Now, we are all familiar with the awesome wiggle expression, right? Alt-click on the stopwatch and type wiggle, parentheses, 5, 200. Okay? So 5 times a second, it's going to move 200 units. So in this case, it's being applied to the X, Y, and Z axis. So pretty wild. Not necessarily what we're looking for. So we want to make this wiggle specific to a particular axis, so X, Y, or Z. But it can be a little tricky to set that particular expression up. So After Effects comes with a pretty cool effects preset called Separate XYZ Position. So if you do a little search, you can take this, drag it into any layer, and it automatically adds an effect called Separate XYZ, and it adds an expression to your position that basically says the value plus this offset, essentially. So pretty simple expression, but kind of long. So now if we just adjust it in the XY position, you can see we can control any particular axis. So if I alt-click on the Y position, I can now set an expression up for this specific control and type wiggle 5, 200. So now it's just going to move up and down. And if we turn on some motion blur, that's looking pretty good. Now, of course, the wiggle expression is a bit limited because you cannot keyframe it. So we need to set up an expression controller so that we can animate that. So with the layer selected, effect, expression control, slider control. And we'll just call it amount, but it doesn't really matter. And in the expression for the Y position that we just set up, I'm going to type, above the wiggle, I'm going to type amount equals, take my pick whip, drag it to the slider, type 10 for the amount, or whatever, it doesn't matter, we're going to change that. And then for the wiggle, we want to wiggle it 5 times a second, and amount is the amount we want to offset it. So in this case, 10. Also, I'm going to take the wiggle amount and change that to 8. Now, we can set up an expression for the amount of wiggles per second, but it's not really a good thing to keyframe because it causes some jumpiness that we don't particularly want. So you can do it, just set up another slider control, but for now, this will be good. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have so far. So that's wiggling 10 pixels. So let's increase that to a bunch. Let's see, I'll go like 400. And that gets it out of the frame. And it's pretty wild. So what you could do is you could duplicate the layer and remove the expressions, and then you can have one layer acting crazy and then one layer that's just static, but I don't care to do that. What we're going to do actually is keyframe the amount of the wiggle in this slider over about a second, and we'll keyframe it down to 0. And then if you hit U on the keyboard, we can change the slider keyframe type to an easy ease by hitting F9. So now, let's play that back. It's a little long. Let's shorten it up some. So now we get sort of this crazy wiggle that comes into place. And we can change this by simply increasing the amount. So why don't we go to 500, play that back. Hey, let's make it even more than that. So it kind of does some crazy stuff, but ultimately comes back into place because the wiggle amount is keyframed now at 0. So gradually it goes from being offset 700 all the way down to nothing. Perfect. Now we can also add some life to the Z position by alt-clicking on Z, typing wiggle, let's see, 5, 100. And that would just give it a little bit of a forward-backwards movement. Kind of cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the background. So I have this lens flare that's already rendered, and it's actually created using Null Light Factory. You can buy that online pretty much anywhere. Pick it up at Walmart. Really cool plugin. I do recommend it. I think it's a couple $100, but it is very, very powerful. So I just created a single lens flare image that you can use for the background. And I'm going to drag that out. And let's go and add a drop shadow, effect, perspective, drop shadow. And what I like to do is set the distance to something kind of small like 3 and softness to something like that also. And increase the opacity. And then I duplicate the drop shadow, edit, duplicate. So now there's 2 drop shadows, one on top of the other. And then I like to soften the second one just so it kind of looks a little bit cooler, I think. Anyway, so now we have our text kind of flies in. And this is a still image, but we can add some life to it also. So I'm going to create an adjustment layer. And we'll put that just above the flare background. And I'm going to choose Effect, Color Correction, Curves, and we'll just brighten it up. Then we'll hit T for the opacity, set it to 50%. Then I'll Alt-click, type wiggle, 5, 50. And 5 times a second, it'll offset 50 pixels or so. So the opacity will just kind of go up and down, looking like that. One other thing, I'm going to add a wiggle to a scale parameter. So this is kind of a cool trick. Now, if you add a wiggle to the scale parameter now, what's going to happen is the wiggle is not going to be uniform. As you can see, it stretches up, stretches wide. The numbers do not match. So you could set up an expression slider or set up a simple variable, scale equals wiggle 0, meaning just the first number in the scale, and then do a semicolon, and then 2 brackets, scale, comma, scale. So our expression, comma, our expression, which would set both of these values to the wiggle value that we create right here. So that's nice, and it will always stay uniform like we like. And then you can always just change the wiggle amount just like you normally would. And there you have it, kind of a wild mix. And remember, you can use this with still images as well. I just applied this to the X position, so it's moving left to right. And, it's just kind of a cool way to add some random, craziness, without having to keyframe a bunch of things. Yet you still have the control that you would particularly want. So now I am back from the Mexican cruise, and it was very nice, I gotta say. Although I wish I knew a little bit more Spanish. I think I paid about $80 for a box of chiclets, but what are you gonna do? Okay, well, I hope you found this tutorial useful. One more round of applause for our friend Sonny Garcia, who created that great little intro you heard. Also, Designer Sound Effects is coming together, and I want to point out something. We have outdone ourselves yet again, and we have added 100 sounds to that collection for a total of 300 sound effects. So it's not posted on the site, but as soon as we get the promo video done and the rest of the extras, that is going to be up on the website. Feel free to email us if you want to be notified when it's out. We may have a pre-release. We may have some coupons. Who knows? Who knows? But anyway, I got to get back to some things. I just bought this huge, barrel of sour licorice. What are they called? Sour punch. And, it's like 80 gallons of licorice. Wow. They bring it over to your house, like on a forklift. It's got those little citric acid crystals on it. I must have gone through about 10 pounds of that stuff. Anyway, this is Andrew Kramer. I gotta go. Those things are calling my name.